Hi, this is the Drupal usability meeting for June 25th, 2019. And we will do a bunch of media issues, at least as far as I've heard. I think Sean has at least a couple lined up.
That is correct. Let me share my screen. Share. So I think everybody can see my screen now. So the first issue I wanted to talk about is issue 3039829. And it's about removing a link to the media item from the media library view, which started as a accessibility issue, but in the end, it turned out to be also a bit of a design issue. So the problem was in the media library view, as you can see here in the UI before, we had a link on the media items. And when you click that link, you go to the edit form of that specific media item. The same view mode was also used in the media library widgets when adding media to a node, for example. But we decided that we did not want people to click away from the node form because it could lead to you losing all your input from your node form. So we did some CSS and JavaScript tricks to make sure you couldn't click that link. But in the end, in the markup, it was still a link. So from an accessibility perspective, that was probably not the best choice. And we started exploring ways to remove the link entirely here. So what we came up with, and it was also some ideas that came up in a previous accessibility of UX meeting, to add a separate edit and delete link on the media library tiles, and then just remove the link entirely from the name. So this issue now has a patch, which I can show you right here. So each of the media items has a link to edit or delete a specific item. We move the checkbox from the right to the left. And you can also now tab through everything in a nice order without you stopping on the label of the field. And one thing we also had to do was move this unpublished label a little bit down because it was at the top left, and now we made space for the checkbox and moved it a little bit down. So in a nutshell, I think that's it, and I'm happy to get some feedback on this so far.
Sean, is this how it would look in the media library, or is this just how it looks in the media view here?
Yeah, so this is only for admin content media. So what we did was we changed the page view. Let me see here. So views, media library. We have several displays. This one is used for the widget table, the regular widget is for the page, and we added links to edit and delete the media to this view and not to the other views. So this one don't have it. And we also added a hidden name element. So when you, so the actual label of this thing is edit and then file name or media name. So for accessibility purposes, when you tab to that element, it will read edit the avocado as egg sandwich and not just edit, because just edit could be confusing, especially when you have multiple edit links on the page. Does that answer your question?
It answers my question 2 minutes ago. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anybody else have thumbs ups or thumbs downs on this one?
A question, as you're tabbing through, how do you select either the checkbox or the edit or the delete?
So when you're on the checkbox, like the checkbox lights up and also the entire frame, and you can just press the space bar, just like you would for any other checkbox.
Okay. So can you select the edit? link?
Yeah, so when you go to the edit link, because it's a link, you cannot press the spacebar, but you have to press the enter. But that's just regular behavior of, yeah, like normal tabbing behavior for links and checkboxes.
Oh, so to get from one item to the next, you have to tab 3 times because it goes through checkbox, edit, delete, checkbox, edit, delete?
Yes.
So previously,
okay.
2 tab stops per item, didn't we?
Yeah, we only had the checkbox and then we had the edit link because the delete was not even an option in the previous version.
Yeah. And let's see what happens when you tab through slowly. Once, twice. Good. Yeah. I was looking for the full name still working.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Does the silence mean everybody is okay with this?
I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Sure, I was waiting for you.
Okay, so the label for the unpublished that now is moved was already a little bit moved from the left. So it's not exactly on the left, on the 0 left.
Oh,
There
you
was
mean
still some
aligned
space.
with the
Yeah.
side of the image?
Yeah, was already like that.
Let me
I
check.
might have lost some.
It was already a little bit from the left. I just moved it a little bit more.
I'm not 100% with how the label looks right now, but I don't really think it should be a blocker at all. My idea, just without actually seeing it working, would be to move the label to the bottom of the image, but just a little, some pixels above the text, and when the text is exactly when it's hovered, the label moves up, so it's kind of related to the text.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying that without actually testing it. So maybe it would make more sense to just make a follow-up from this. Like
if you could live with a follow-up, that's probably the best, because moving the label and the text at the same time probably would need some JavaScript.
Or JavaScript, or just moving the label into another
div or
or
just
something
changing
like
the
that.
markup. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, not something that should be done right now.
Okay.
So I will be okay with how is it right now on a design perspective also. So
I will make sure to write a comment and create a follow-up for that.
great, thanks.
So I feel quite positive towards the change of adding the link, the edit and delete links to the top right. This is slightly unrelated, but looking at it, I realize there's just something a bit odd about the checkbox. And I think it maybe is the size of it in relation to the other elements. And I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, because I actually don't know how much control we have over sizes of checkboxes in browsers, but this is probably, again, a follow-up to look at that, but just something I think it's more noticeable now that there's other contextual links along the top.
I agree with you. I was hesitating saying anything because it's a follow-up. I mean, I think we all agree that you've nailed the scope of the ticket and the issue at hand. But the checkbox, I'm looking at it, I'm like, shouldn't it look the same as the pencil and the X? Same size, square, color. It'll actually, it needs a border so that it can kind of stand out against the photograph, because the middle one gets a little lost to me when the checkbox is sitting directly on the gray.
Yeah.
Like the pattern, it blends in with the pattern. So I mean, as a follow-up, I mean, I think it's a legitimate thing to be like, you can replace a checkbox now in CSS and safely do it and not have any accessibility issues, and make it match the icons to the right. It'll stand out a lot more for people.
I agree about making it bigger in a follow-up. I probably wouldn't make that bigger as the same size of the icons on the right.
Well, actually, there was a width and height on a checkbox, and it was 30 pixels before, and I now made it a little bit smaller to match the size of these things. But for some reason, that only works on Linux browsers. Is what I have seen at least in demos and also in the tests and stuff like that. So I haven't really put a lot of investigation in it yet because it was a little bit out of scope. But I totally agree. I think the intention was that this should be bigger at least because there was CSS for that. But yeah, it never came up before. So I will make sure to create a follow-up for that as well and comment in the issue.
Sure. I think the checkbox is it correct? The checkbox is more of also a technical thing because you can select it if I'm correct, you can select it without clicking the checkbox. Like you just have to click the item. Is that right?
That's correct. You can click anywhere on the image. I don't think at the moment you can click the text.
Yeah.
Because I think that's because of the selection of the text or something.
Yes, that's good that you can select the text.
Yeah. So yeah, we could even just we could find a way to make the checkbox a bit more noticeable, or even a bit more without having to use a checkbox, and still make it all accessible.
I totally agree.
So it sounds like the scope of the issue that we're actually trying to address we've got, and I'm not hearing a lot of pushback on any of that. But we should file a follow-up, tag it needs design to improve the look of the checkboxes and sort of the
checkboxes and the unpublished label.
And the unpublished label. So does that sound okay to everybody? And then the reason I'm pushing this is because this one that we're reviewing now is a accessibility stable blocker for us. So I would like to get it done as soon as possible. And if that plan sounds okay to everybody, then we can just do that.
Yeah, that's fun.
Can I see the tabbing again?
Sure.
Any direction?
I will start from the start.
Go slow. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I think another follow-up is that we could really do with better focus indicators. What we've got, say, is we've got the general focus style from 7, which has that blue halo, but it's not guaranteed to stand out against your image, whereas it is reasonably reliable if it's just against a white page background. So, for instance, on the potatoes image on the right-hand side where we have the X button, when that has a blue halo, it's kind of fighting against the fact that the top corner of that image is also blue.
Yep.
It's kind of mitigated that you sometimes get the top border of the circle stepping outside of the image, but I don't think that's consistent all the way through. If you look at the barbecue ribs one, it doesn't, because of I guess there's an aspect ratio there.
Yep, I think that's a totally fair comment. Depending on the colors of your image and the aspect ratio of your image, and also the size of your screen, because if I resize my screen, it might get better or worse depending on where you're at.
And the checkbox has got a related issue, which is that the checkbox itself, when it's filled in, is blue and doesn't really stand. So a blue outline against a blue checkbox doesn't really stand out. I don't know if that's specific to the media library, though. but we can tell by using the select all media checkbox if we tab back to that.
Yeah, I didn't see any CSS trying to change or improve the default checkbox behavior.
Yeah, I know we're addressing this sort of thing in Claro, which has got a kind of interesting double outline. You get like a 1 pixel of a 1 or 2 pixels of white border, then you get a 1 or 2 pixels of green border, and the idea is that at least one of them will have high contrast against whatever it's surrounding.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if a possible solution to some of these issues might be to just do what we're doing with the label and provide a solid, or at least mostly opaque background to the top section, if only when that media item is highlighted or selected.
Okay, so you mean this top area could have like a white from, and then maybe fading transparent to the bottom or something, to make sure that these top buttons are contrasting enough.
Yeah, so like along the top where you've got from the checkbox to the edit and the delete links, you could have again another slightly opaque or solid colored bar along there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's best to create a separate issue for the focus styles on these things, and then we can investigate if we want a double outline or maybe a little transparent fading background or whatever. We could probably make like a design proposal for both, and then we can just bring it up in another UX meeting.
Yeah, a lot of it kind of the severity of this isn't. If we're going by WebCAG 2, then they kind of technically pass, because WebCAG 2 just says that you need to have focus visible, and it doesn't give you any suggestion at all for how you actually measure that. There are no thresholds to get across. You could have a white background and focus could be, EEE gray, and it would technically pass. Even it's only when you get into WebCAG 2.1 that it starts actually saying, hang on, we need some thresholds here. So we've got the Claro designs. The Claro approach to focus styles is going to address that and keep them very consistent. Whereas 7, we kind of have a big mixture of different focus styles, and they're somewhat inconsistent in their effectiveness. But we know it's going to get better with Claro. So it's not fixing focus styles here wouldn't be a total disaster, a total blocker for us, depending on how fast Claro moves, of course. But
okay, so if I understood correctly, this issue as is should be good enough, and we will file 3 follow-ups for the focus styles, the style of the checkbox or making it at least bigger, and the status label. Correct?
That sounds right to me.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have something they want to talk about right now? Should we move on to the file field design update thing?
We're almost at halftime, so let's move on to the file upload thing, since that's going to be more contentious.
Yeah, I don't have that patch installed right now, but I think what we at least agreed upon is that the current approach is probably not going to work, even if we try to tweak or hack it a little bit, and that we probably need some new designs. Is that correct?
For the recording, can you read the issue number?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that is 2113931. So the problem with this design, and please, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in the current implementation, at least, we made it so that the file input is this drop zone area, because file inputs by default in HTML5 allow drag and drop file uploads. And to implement the design, we've added a second button which triggers the input via JavaScript. And what that means when you go through this by tabbing or with a screen reader is that you first tab to the drop zone thingy, which is not really a button, but is presented to the user as a button. And you then tab to a second button with the add file label. And both basically do the same thing, which is a problem. And in the current design, we try to come up with solutions, but I think we figured out that having these two, drop zone and the button, like separate next to each other is probably not something we are going to make accessible.
Yeah, so for accessibility, it's got a couple of overlapping problems. The first is you have two inputs, one after another, which do exactly the same thing, but it isn't clear that they are separate. It's not clear that they're operating the same thing. The fact there's two tab stops mean that you've got just too many tab stops for keyboard users. When these things stack up and you've got like add, several fields and find it in the context of the whole page, you're kind of adding needless tab stops. The other curious thing would be that if someone was to use speech control and they were to say click button, the two ways you can do it, you could say click add file and it'd be clear which one you were going for. But if you said add button, it would kind of offer you a choice of two things. The one that looks like an icon with a dash border, and the one that looks more like a curly corner button. When in fact you're only, it wouldn't be clear that those are two separate things or which one you should choose. And there might be problems with for screen readers. Certainly they would, just like the keyboard users would have two controls to tab through. But there would also be a problem. They might have different labels on these things. So there's quite a long discussion thread in Slack at the moment, which we should probably grab so we can make a summary of it. But Sean had a mock-up of what he thought it could look like, where we have the large draggable area with what looks like a button inside it.
Oh yeah, I will try to see if I can find that real quick. Oh wait, I have it here in Slack, of course. Should be here somewhere. No. Yes, this one. Yep. So this one was designed by Christina, or at least it was like a quick mock-up that we made in the Media Library sprint in December. And in this one, I think the whole area would be draggable, and then this thing should be the label of the drop zone.
Yeah, the exact markup, we've got options with that. The important thing is whether you're going through with a keyboard, with a screen reader, or with a speech control, you're only dealing with one control, not a button which presses a button behind the scenes. The exact markup can vary. I've actually just been trying some markup for this. You could say that the idea is that the actual file input itself will be visually hidden. I think that's what we had in the previous implementation too. But so you wouldn't see the default browser button, which is a bit crappy looking. But instead, you would see the blue button inside this larger area. I've seen this pattern used a lot of other times before. I actually saw it in VLC Media Player. If you open that up without having selected a file beforehand, you get something like this. And the idea is that for drag wise, you could go to anywhere within the dashed outline. But if you were tabbing through for focus styling, we could actually make the focus style appear much closer to the button. And for speech control users, the invisible file input would be kind of right in the middle of that space, physically located very close to the fake button, which helps if you're using the show numbers tool. Speech control, you can either say the name of the thing that you're trying to hit, or you can say just click button and it will find any buttons and offer you a choice of numbers. The idea here is that the number would appear very close to the blue fake button.
So the thing, sorry, you go first.
Thank you. So what, just to be sure that I'm following this, so ideally instead of having two buttons, even inside the draggable area, we should only have one visual buttons. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, that will be implemented as one button.
Okay.
But the click area would be big, even though the button would kind of look a normal size for a button.
Okay, because I say that because on the previous mockups that we had a button for adding a new file and a button for browsing the media library. I'm not really sure what's there right now. No, I'm not really sure what's the implementation right now for media.
I think like the media library is for media fields, and this is specifically about file upload fields. So there are two separate things, and I don't think you can mix them.
Okay, so the moment that you have media, by default, instead of having a file, independent file or something like that, you have one or two buttons there.
For the media fields, you have a button to open the media library, and inside the media library, you could have this drop zone thing to add a new file.
Okay, so you never can add.
I don't think you can have both. And then if you add the file field directly to a node, for example, then you can have only this and no media library button.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're mutually exclusive. We're talking about changing how files are uploaded, like the user interface for uploading files in basically any context that files are uploaded.
I see.
Yeah, it's different.
See. Cool, okay.
So the thing I was struggling with a bit is that the input, file input, let me try to show it here. We have this, this is the most basic example I could find. So we have the file input and a label in this case. And the file input, which is this field here, gets announced as a button by screen readers. Only instead of reading this choose file label, it uses the choose a profile picture, which is the field label, as the button label. So my question here would be to Andrew is if a user would try to announce this by saying click choose file, that would probably not work, or is that incorrect?
I was trying to test that actually. It was generally with speech control, if you manage to say the name of the label, that is to choose a profile picture, that will probably activate it. Another option is to say choose button. Sorry, it would say click button, and it would it would look at any buttons that are in the viewport, and it would find that one and put a little number next to it. So you'd say click button, choose 3. What I was interested in knowing is whether you could say choose file to activate it with speech control. But I'm having a damnedest time trying to get a copy of Dragon. I don't have it on this machine, and I thought you could still download a trial version, but they've disappeared that from the internet.
Okay.
I do have some other speech control available, but I wanted to try Dragon. We can look into that. I think the thing is, if we have that as an invisible control, then a speech control user isn't going to see choose file. So then they're certainly not likely to say the name of something they can't see.
The reason I brought it up is because in this particular design, we have this add new images label.
Yeah.
Which would be equivalent to choose a profile picture.
Yeah.
And that would also be the technical name of the hidden input field.
Yeah.
So if we want to change the hidden input field to be triggered by a different label, because the browse local files would probably make more sense as a label for the hidden input field.
Yes.
Then we probably need to make this little thing here the label of the hidden inputs. And then we suddenly have this add new images thing, which is the user generated label for the field.
Yep.
And that somehow needs to fit into the markup, and we don't have any examples of that in core yet. So that's why I was particularly interested in how we could solve that, or what the markup of that would look like.
There's two interesting things here. One is that the add new image is the technical label, but you're right. Browse local files is what you would see as a button, and to pass WebCAG, that browse local files really should be part of the accessible name. We can override this using an ARIA label attribute, and the important thing about the ARIA label attribute is that it will need to have the exact phrase browse local files somewhere inside the ARIA label, but the actual ARIA label could be longer. So I'm not so worried about that part as I was about the fact that there used to be 2 controls, because there are different markup patterns, and we could, some of this we get as default markup from the which is common to all form inputs, but we do have the option of actually overriding that on a just for file inputs. We also need to look at how things work with the multi-value fields. So if you've got a file field with like unlimited cardinality, it gets the multi-value widget as well, which doesn't use the label the same way.
And what label do you mean by this?
I mean the add new images. If you try this with a multi-value file field, you actually get a detailed summary.
Oh yes.
With the label as the summary, and you get some invisible labels instead.
Yeah, I'll try to add a file field to my content type real quick. Show what that would look like.
So we might want to use a template override for a specific form element type. In which case that would be inherited by whichever theme was using it. Sort the markup out for the core one.
Yeah, so you mean this element?
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. And this also introduces like a new label, add a new file.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we probably need to design for both the single and the multi-value fields.
Yeah. There's an interesting gotcha, which is that the file input control isn't just the bit that says choose files. It's the whole thing that says choose files, no file chosen. And so if you actually were to, the problem here is that we've actually got some JavaScript. So when you add when it does an on change event, it does an Ajax upload. But a normal file field doesn't do that until you press the submit button, because it doesn't have a custom JavaScript handler. But if we were to, you can see it on the Drupal.org issue queue. In fact, if you were to drag a file onto the button, it would tell you the name of the file that you dragged up, and then you would press the upload button.
Oh, it would show right here. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've got the JavaScript that fires straight away, so we might have an interesting situation if JavaScript didn't run, but CSS did, and they didn't know what file had been selected.
So to move this forward, I think it would really help to start from the HTML markup and try to use that as a constraint for the design.
Yep.
And then I'm not really sure if you have time and how much time it would take to at least get a basic direction of this. I don't think we need to figure out every little span and text thing, but it would be nice if we can just get a general idea of what this should look like. And then with that, we can make some HTML mockups and maybe use it like apply the cloud design already to that or something. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, I've already started some markup. I can show you that if I share my screen. In fact,
Yeah.
I've dropped a link into the Slack, so we can
I can
stick with your screen if you want.
Yeah, I already stopped sharing. So if you want to share,
there it
no
comes.
problem.
When I find the button,
It's on the left.
good, somewhere.
Yeah, we can see you.
Yeah. So I'll pop that over there, and we can have some things. These two look the same. They won't win any design awards, but the markup is slightly different in each case. We got form 1 and form 2. Is this text here big enough for you?
I can read it.
Yeah.
A little bigger would be nice.
Okay.
Oh, in fact, I can go. Yeah, that will do. Oops, let's get that. Yeah, doesn't like a few things. Right, the CSS probably doesn't matter, but I've got a couple of forms, each of which has one input. The inputs are visually hidden. I've given them some ARIA label, add file 1, add file 2, so that you can tell them apart. They both have this big square class, and they both have this fake button class, but the actual element names are different. In the first one, I treated the big square as the label and the fake button as being a little span. And in the second one, I treated the big square just as being a div, and the fake button is an actual proper label. There are some focus styles as well. I went ahead and used focus within. So here comes a focus style. That's one of them. And then exactly the same on the next one. But the difference in these is that where the big square is the label element, you can click on that and it will open up. But if you, in the second one, the big square is just a div, and that one, you can click on it, it doesn't work. But if you click on the actual label, is the fake button is the actual label, and that will work. So there's different markup patterns we can have, and that's just, there's no JavaScript in this. That's just basic HTML. But if we were saying that this big square, whether it's a label or a div, if we say that big square has got, some on-change handler, or that is, or the on-change handler will be on the input. The big square could have any kind of JavaScript drag and drop that we wanted, or we could get it for free by using a label as the big square. It doesn't matter which, there's different markup patterns. For speech control, you could, well, hang on, we've seen mouse control. We either have a big clickable area or a small clickable area. For keyboard control, it's one tab stop, then I'm on to the paragraph, then I'm on to the next form. The whole thing's just one tab stop. For screen readers, they will hear that they are buttons with the name add file 1 and add file 2. So they're different buttons, different names. That comes from the ARIA label. And for speech control users, they've got two options. They could say click button, and click button would activate the input with type file, but that's visually hidden. But it doesn't really matter. If they say click button, what will happen, what I want to test, actually, that's why I was looking for Dragon, is would Dragon pick up on the presence of a visually hidden input? That's what I wanted to check. That might be an option to do it as an opacity 0 input as well. I wanted to check both of those. What I was trying to say is, if you said click button, would it offer you these buttons as a choice? But you could also say click add file, and it will offer you a choice of buttons, and that comes from the fact that the visible label is add file, and the actual accessible names include the text add file. You wouldn't have to say add file 2. You would be able to get away with saying add file. So a speech control user would operate that as well. The tricky part is whether visually hidden inputs are detected by Dragon. The idea is that if I look at where this visually hidden input is, it's looking at the crosshairs that have appeared, it's actually somewhere like here, which is where the visually hidden thing is. And so if Dragon does pick up on that, it's going to drop some numbers here and here in this, and it would be better to position them so it dropped the numbers adjacent to the thing that actually looks like a button. But we can improve that. It's a big if. I really don't know if Dragon picks up on this. But that's what I got started on, at least. So we can have a look at that link and have a look at that markup and change it. The styles involve, I've used focus within, but we can also fake that with JavaScript. Focus within doesn't work with Internet Explorer or the current version of Edge. But the Chromium Edge, I'm assuming it will work with. We'd only need to worry about Internet Explorer. That's my demo anyway.
And that looks great to me. I think we can definitely work with that. And the only thing I was personally curious about is how to fit in that extra label. and I think the rest is pretty clear, and I understand what this is supposed to do, I guess.
Yeah, the way that this label is just the text inside the label is add file, but it's been overridden with the ARIA label. But in this case, this label also amounts to add file, because that's the text content when you flatten it.
I'm sorry, I meant when the user generated label, when they create the field. So they will have a field called image, for example.
Yeah.
Because most people don't understand that that field label is also for screen readers. So I see a lot of sites just call the image field just image.
Yeah, we need to look at exactly what we put in that ARIA label. What we can't have is something like add file in the blue button and an ARIA label which said add image file. That would fail because we wouldn't have the exact phrase add file. The idea is that the visible phrase is what a speech control user is likely to say, and if that needs to be, the exact phrase needs to be in the accessible machine name.
Yeah, the problem is we just don't know what the user is going to call the field.
Yeah, so we'd end up having to have add file : image or something like that.
Yeah, but that could also get a little weird when it says like add a header image, and then it was be add file, add a header image. So it's just something I'm personally struggling with.
Yeah,
how to fit the user generated label in here in a logical way.
Yeah, that's not easy. That is tricky, but we can work around that anyway.
Cool. I would be very, very interested to see what could be a solution for that.
Yeah, it'd be good to go and look at because we need to take in mind things like multi-value fields as well, where the delta gets used in the you don't see the delta visually, but screen reader users do use it as part of their label.
Yeah. What could be a good way to move this forward? Should we create a separate issue for this to investigate what the HTML could look like for the drop zone file widget? Because I assume we are probably going to create a totally new file widget for this.
Yeah, if that wants to be a separate issue, that's okay.
Okay, and then we can probably...
we just need a place to experiment with options there.
Cool. I will make sure to create that issue. I mean, update the existing issue that we are going to explore new markup and designs.
Yeah.
So, does that mean that it will replace the other issue, or I'm lost right now?
Hearing all the objections to the current design and solution, I think, and also the fact that the other issue has like 300 comments, I'm inclined to say let's close the other one as outdated or something and just start over.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, I think what we need is we need to explore the different markup options, and so I could see us going through a bunch of patches which are all quite different, and then doing a comparison of which one, the pros and cons of each. And the idea would be at least figure out the markup, then style it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and my it would totally have my preference to start with just HTML and do not do anything in Drupal for a while, because creating the file widget is probably going to be some form of struggle knowing the code of the existing file widget. So if we could just try to focus on like the perfect markup for this, and then try to create the widget after that. That would probably save us a ton of work.
Yeah, it's a little bit. We often do things a bit backwards in Drupal core. We kind of like come up with the design first, and then make the markup fit. But I think with this one, it's just a little bit tricky. And for accessibility, we want the markup right before the styles. But it could be a good test of Twig.
You bring up the manage file widget, and this is a UX meeting. There are problems with that code because it's a lot of stuff going on. The layman's way to describe it is that widget is designed to allow people to upload files and to handle the file field at the same time. So I'll just throw out there, like, there's an obvious code problem, and someone who dives into it sees it. It might make it easier to get this done by creating a new element to handle this that's cleaner. Because I think it's over 1,000 lines of code just to handle file uploads.
I plus one that in Lightning. I wrote my own file upload thing just because my file was such a garbage fire.
I was being nice about it. I wasn't gonna say that.
I mean, it's not a garbage fire in the sense that like that it's stupid. It's just super complicated and very hard to grok. So I think I agree with that approach.
Okay. And Sean, I'm hoping it'll make it easier to you'll just be able to kind of focus on just this widget.
Oh, I definitely am totally done with that existing code.
Okay.
Yeah, so we probably should have, I don't know, pulled the plug on this patch a while ago, but we felt it was close and tried to push through it, but in the end it didn't work, and there's a lot of reasons for it, and I don't know, I think we can do better.
So should we close that issue?
Yeah, I think we should probably close it as outdated, and then create a new issue to begin exploring the HTML, and when that's done, start exploring the design.
Okay. Do you want to put the final stake in the heart of that issue, or should I do it? Somebody else want the honors?
Yeah. Yeah, the honors. I don't care. I can do it. You can do it. It's fine by me.
Can I just to clarify something that I picked up on a few moments ago when it was mentioned about creating a new drop zone widget? Is it implied that we would potentially have two widgets, then one with a drop zone and another without a drop zone? That's just a refresh of the existing file upload widget.
I was going to ask pretty much the same thing.
Wouldn't do two approaches for the same file, the same field. Why would we want two different approaches here?
We have widgets because there are different ways you can input certain types of data. So having like an old school file widget and a new bright and shiny drop zone widget could help, not touch existing sites as much, for example. And also, there are a lot of teams who don't have any styling for this new element. So if you just replace the old elements, a lot of sites will probably not look good.
I wonder on that point if, because if we're providing, I don't know again how much of this is going to be in the theme layer and how much of this is going to be in the actual widget itself, but if we're providing a lot of the styling to make this work, I suppose there could be conflicts, but it might be nice to have consistency. If we do have a widget with drag and drop and one without, it would be nice to have a design consistency there, I think. That's my kind of gut feeling.
Yeah, I visualize this as a progressive enhancement where we get this markup that's right without drag. Because once we do this markup, we lose the drag, and we have to then layer on the drag and drop. So I think it can be a progressively enhanced widget. So And if it's done at the theme layer, someone could tweak it. They could implement the drag and drop the way they want if they don't like the way Core's doing it.
But that would mean that the existing, or at least we should make the new element look exactly the same as the old one if you don't do anything, right?
So are we talking about 7?
I'm talking about any theme because the file fields are used in the front end, in the back end. Web form has a file field, for example. So these fields could be anywhere.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. Like, so I'm familiar with this because in web form we're using the managed file element. The file field uses the managed file element, but has a little flag that says don't use 90% of this code. It literally has a flag that's like, don't use a lot of this code, use my code. And there's some that's what makes it so complex. I feel like for the file field to work better, it would be better to just have a very simple element that's like, here's a file input that supports drag and drop. Here's the backend logic, and that's it. Yeah, we'd have to it's a much more diving into the code to see the problem.
Yeah, maybe it's best for now if we just, like Andrew said, focus on the raw HTML and getting that right, and then figure out the Drupal implementation once we figured out the fundamental HTML.
Yeah, I really just wanted to put it out there so that whoever's doing the work when they start pulling their hair out knows that most people know there's problems with the code that you're touching.
There's a kind of if this thing is treated as a whole new form API element, and we call it file field 2 or whatever, then that might have an advantage that we've got the old, ugly, hideous, messy code version, which everyone's using already. Is that at some point in the future we can just deprecate the old one. I don't know whether that will be done in time for 9, but maybe it will, maybe it won't. But at least we'd have a kind of, by forking it and having file field 2, we would have we'd be able to get adventurous and do something really good that's nice to theme, for example, without any risk of breaking any custom modules which are using the old one.
Yeah, I was part of me was thinking a similar thing where we could even, from a visual perspective, or like its label could be renamed to like file upload or file classic, like to indicate it's an older style or something. Because I think you're right. There's that problem where we don't want to break all of the existing stuff that depends on it, but at the same time, we probably don't want to limit ourselves from implementing something that could be really, really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of modules that enhance this thing. For example, we have this crop API module where you have different modules that allow you to focus on certain aspects of the image, and they all try to do their own thing with the existing widget. So yeah, there are going to be contrib issues if we touch too much of the existing code. I was already worrying about it a bit with the issue as is. But maybe that's a discussion for later, I guess. I will just make sure to summarize most of the things and close the issue and open up a follow-up for getting the markup right.
Okay, then after that, when you know the markup, just ping us on the admin UI, or also if someone else is going to work on 7 designs or not, just ping us. to know what we need to design. I will.
We can probably create the design issue as well and just make that postponed on the markup issue.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
All right. Anything else? We are over time, by the way.
Yeah, I'll leave the other issue I had for the next time. That one was less important.
Great. Any other concerns from people? No? Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I think it was really fruitful. I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, it was really great. And thanks to Andrew for all that knowledge about the drag and drop file upload. Really useful.
Yeah,
Same.
really useful.
Thanks for all that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.